Welcome to the Tone, Shapes and Colors Masters series, organized by New York Jazz Workshop. It's great to see you all here. This series is specifically for students and music enthusiasts, semi-professional, professional, beginners, intermediate. It's our way from the New York Jazz Workshop to offer some knowledge and inspiration. This particular masterclass is about a very specific topic. We're going to talk about 12-tone theories and how to apply that in a musical context, specifically in composition and improvisation. Now, when we talk about 12-tone systems and theories, we a lot of times associate it with chromaticism. And I get a lot of students coming to me saying, what is chromaticism, how do you approach it, and what is, and the 12-tone idea is out there, everybody knows about it, but not many people really know the content of this principle. Well, chromaticism was there really from the beginning on. If you look at the jazz history and you go, you look at the blues scale, you got chromaticism right there. You look at the bebop scales, that's chromaticism. You look at tension notes and all that kind of stuff, chromaticism. You look at harmonic superimpositions, is harmonic chromaticism. You look at polychordal systems, is chromaticism. So it's everywhere. So 12-tone is not the only principle that deals with chromaticism. It's everywhere in all music forms and really from the beginning on. Having said that, I had the fortune to have a great conversation with John at the Jazz Standard. We were at the same gig together, and he started laying it out for me. And I was so inspired. It was so great. And the first thing that struck me is, first of all, that I got to practice. But the second thing also, it was such a pity that not more people were there to witness this conversation. Because it was really significant. I found it very profound, very significant. And with that in mind, I contacted Marco and set up this particular masterclass. Now, another thing that is also very interesting is that when I look at my bookshelf, there are 2 books of advanced music that I regard on the highest standard. And these are 2 of my most favorite books that I really studied from the cover to the back, which I cannot say of many of the books that are next to my nightstand and that are still waiting. And one book is from Lumila Yulela, which deals with romanticism to the 12-tone road, which is published by Advanced Music. And another great book is Dave Liebman, who wrote a great book on chromaticism in jazz, harmony and melody, also published by Advanced Music. I'm now very happy to announce that there's a third one that should be in a row, which is the concept written by Mr. O Gallagher. So please give him a welcome applause. So, the first thing that struck me with the book, you gave me a sample, so I immediately started to get into it. And the first thing that struck me was how beautifully the theory is composed theoretically. I really thought it was like a haiku poem or something when I see how these rows are put together and how they are balanced and how they shape and the consistency with the shapes, how that all works together. That was the first thing. And then, of course I read it first before I started even daring to get to my horn. And then I started to get on my horn with that stuff, and I was again really struck with how fast you come with fresh new ideas that are almost the same but totally different from what you play. And it blew me away. It's not that you have to go to the book halfway through. It's pretty much when you start with the 1 + 2 little cells that you already start to get the feel of, wow, this is quite amazing. Now, my first question, before we get more into that, how did you get into this kind of theory? Was it that you woke up one day and said, you know, I have to buy some bread, I have to do the laundry, and I got to figure out this 12-tone thing, and then I'm going to pick up my life?
Right. Yeah, no, it was exactly like that.
It was exactly,
yeah,
I see that thought. So.
No, the funny thing is that I've been interested in modern classical music for a long time. I mean, you know, going back to my earliest saxophone teacher, you know, we would study classical saxophone literature and, you know, get into like, you know, all the, you know, repertoire, and a lot of that is 20th century, most of it is 20th century music and deals with a lot of chromaticism and stuff. So I've always been very interested in that music and a big fan of, you know, Schoenberg and Weber, and curious about it. And so I would do, you know, just research as I know you've done. You just like search out all the books you can find dealing with, you know, topics of chromaticism, topics about 12-tone composition, because there's not anything, well, there's starting to become more stuff you can find dealing with jazz and that, but really that's only happened within the last like 10 years. I mean, you know, there wasn't that much material like in the 90s you could find, other than classical, you know, kind of books dealing on analysis of Schoenberg. I mean, there was great books by George Pearl. There's a great book by Charles Wernin, but they're all deal with composition, and it's all compositional kind of tools. And you know, then trying to read, you know, Milton Babbitt's writings and trying to understand where these guys are coming from, and then you know, a great you know, understood a lot of it, was trying to write a lot of music based on that. But, you know, stumbled on a book by Peter Schatt, which actually was the first book that kind of codified it. It never really was that clear to me how to use it in jazz, except when I came across his book, because it was really the kind of thing, was like everything clicked that I had known before, now that I saw the way that he presented the idea of presenting 12-tone rows, each one being a basically having its own chromatic palette. So you have 12 chromatic regions that are, you know, similar, and you can think of in terms of them being akin to, you know, the next set of symmetric scales after whole tone and after diminished. You know, so you know, found that book, and that kind of the light went on, and reading, there were several other books on modern, you know, harmony that I've got, and you know, I've been writing out exercises and trying to organize it in a way that made sense to me, because as improvisers, we are really utilitarian. We tend to think in terms of, like, you know, objects, and we're playing and we're developing ideas, and melody is an object that we deal with, and we can, you know, build on it and stretch it, and so, you know, I started writing these exercises and things, and then slowly that's the genesis of the book. And you know, it was really for my own use to try and develop these things. And then I realized maybe other people might be interested in it, because it took a lot of different sources for me to find, you know, to find this material. So, you know, it's kind of making it easier for other people to not have to wade through all that material.
You definitely have, I can tell you that.
So,
yeah. Great. Well, you know, in the book you list also all the books that inspired you.
Right.
Which is great. So please, if you get the book, you will know not only what he concluded out of that material, but also where the inspiration comes from, which I think is so important, because like that book that you mentioned, Peter Scott, this is a very important work, and so is the Lila book and all those.
Absolutely.
Kind of, you know,
and each one just feeds your imagination, and you know, you start to make connections between all this information, and you know. I found that even, you know, not totally understanding something, you know, that you're wading through, it's worthwhile, because at some point the light will go on, and you might get a piece of information from another source that makes sense, and then makes the other thing kind of click for you. So, you know, I would just force myself to read, you know, all these books, and if I didn't understand all of it, that was okay. I would, you know, because very often they're very analytical. A lot of them deal with mathematics. And, you know, I don't even balance my checkbook, so... so, you know...
Plus then you get the piano jobs also to deal with, you know.
Right, no, exactly. So the math, a lot of times with these theorists, you know, a lot of the heavy theorists were originally mathematicians, you know, and so that's where that comes from. And it's like, that can be very off-putting to jazz musicians who are really kind of, it's a more earthy thing, you know, it's an ear thing, it's like, how does it feel, how does it sound, you know, we're not thinking, you know, that way. So
Right,
it can be
great.
a little off-putting.
I would like to ask a question about it. Before we do that, are there maybe 5 works to listen to that were an inspiration to this work that you made? Because you were mentioning one piece of Webern, which I think was Opus 29, or
Right, Opus 29 and both of and 31 they're really great.
What else?
Opus 27 as well,
Right,
which is the piano variations. It's the only piece that Webern wrote that's for piano, solo piano, which is unusual because you think like, you know, piano is basically the instrument that all composers are, you know, conversant with. That's like, you know, and it's fantastic. It's a great piece, and it deals with all the really advanced things about symmetry that Webern was into, and, you know, 12-tone rows, and how to manipulate, you know, just they're beautiful pieces.
Right.
Just really great.
Are there any other composers you can recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, one of my favorites, who is actually a product of the serial music, but I wouldn't really consider him strictly serial. I mean, there's all kinds of terminology when it comes to 20th century composition, because, you know, you say 12-tone, and immediately there's a preconception about, like, you know, of a certain period, and you can't repeat pitches, and then, you know, serial, well, then what does that mean? Is that 12-tone? And it becomes very confusing. It's very much like the terminology we have in jazz, when you say, you know, bebop, or hard bop, or post-bop, or, you know, fusion, or what does it mean? Well, it means different things to different people, depending on their preconceptions.
Right.
So, and there are, I mean, you know, in strict 12-tone, there are some rules you have to follow, the same way there is in strict species counterpoint. Like, you know, you've got species 2 and species 3.
Right.
You got to follow these rules, and that's true. But, you know, we're at this point, and it's important to know, but at this point in, you know, in music, composers don't necessarily, well, have they ever really follow the rules,
right.
You know, and they're breaking rules and finding ways to manipulate things, you know. So, but other composers that I love, Ligeti is like, you know, or Ligeti, however you want to say it, is one of my favorite. And, you know, his piano etudes are kind of probably the greatest piano pieces of the 20th century. I mean, they're amazing. You know, Book 1, 2, and 3 are. They people, only like a handful of people could ever play them until, you know, the last 10 years. You know, they're amazing. And you know, obviously I love Schoenberg. I love Webern is a big influence on me, and you know the other composers as well from the 50s. You know, I mean Stockhausen is I love, you know, some of his music, and some Xenakis I love. You know, some of his depends on the pieces. Like I have obviously certain things that I love. One of my favorite composers, Pierre Boulez. You know, Reponse is amazing. If you've ever heard the clarinet dialogues for solo clarinet and recorded clarinet, wow, that stuff is amazing. You know, and for us, it's like it sounds to me like something someone can improvise. You know, it's like, you know, and Elliott Carter. I mean, you know,
right. So this goes on.
Yeah, it goes on and on.
Now, how about in the jazz scene? Would you recommend any composers in the jazz scene that you think did a good adaptation or a good?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's lots of. I mean, you know, my taste in music. You know, obviously, I love, you know, a lot of color, a lot of chromaticism, and a lot of, you know. Although I love all music, but those things really resonate with me. And you know, composers today. I mean, we were just talking about Miles.
Right.
O Gallaghar.
Exactly. Right.
He's an amazing composer.
Right.
His music is fantastic. If you've never heard his records, they're well worth, you know, repeated listenings. You know, and you know, Gary Thomas's music, and you know, going back to Steve Coleman and those guys, and Vijay, and you know, Rudresh, I think is doing some really great things rhythmically and, you know, musically, and you know, then there's other guys that are more subtle, you know, with that kind of thing. Russ Lawson, amazing pianist. Yeah. You know, his thing is unlike anyone else's. You know, he's using chromaticism in the way that he constructs things, and he's heavily rooted in modern classical music. Heavily, you know. And it's funny because, like, you listen to Russ improvise free, sounds like an Elliott Carter piece.
Right.
You know, it does. I mean, I went to see Elliott Carter. There was a concert that Pierre Laurent Amard played at Carnegie Hall, and Russ and I went, and he was playing a bunch of Elliott Carter pieces, and then he was playing the Ives Concord. And when the Elliott Carter pieces came, you know, I didn't know the pieces that he was playing, and it just sounded to me like, wow, that could just be Russ improvising, actually. I mean, it really is that, you know.
Wow, it's fantastic.
So, So,
great. Yeah. Well, I hope you all made the notes. You got some listening to do now. So I have a few more. Actually, I would like to read two paragraphs out of your book. And I was saying that for a specific reason before we get technical. And that has to do mostly with the philosophy of how to practice this and how to approach this. And I thought you said it really well. The first one that, and we talked about this briefly also, I'm going to read it literally so I won't misquote you. That would not be good.
I hope my grammar was correct.
Listen, I'm Dutch, I mean, you know, I wouldn't even notice. Alright, let's see. Okay, cool. It's on page 32, it says here, you talk about the pitches, but what really struck me and what we talked about a little briefly is here, practice them slowly and visualize each trichord as it is played. Now, it's a visualization that I found very profound and very important, just in general and everything. And when you know I'm teaching my class about rhythm and meter, it's a lot about it.
Yeah.
But could you explain, from your point of perspective within your grammatic approach, what you mean by visualization and what the general philosophy of it is?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, all of this, you know, it should be, whenever you're practicing anything, it all needs to be done in your head. Writing it out is great for when you're first trying to understand how it fits together, but everything ultimately has to be done inside you, because when you're improvising, there is no piece of paper that you can rely on. So you have to, and the best way to do that is, you know, when you're working on new material, whether you're dealing with, you know, chords from major scales or minor scales or whatever, is that, you know, as you play something, you play it very slowly, you know, and relaxed as possible, and, you know, with your eyes closed, you know, in a very meditative state, and try and visualize what it is you're doing, pitch by pitch. And if it's, especially in the case of like trichords, you know, or tetrachords.
Does everybody know what the trichord is? Maybe you should explain.
A trichord is the premise of what the book is about. And the word trichord, I'm not sure who coined it. I think it might have been Milton Babbitt, but I'm not positive. But the reason in 12-tone music and in post-tonal music they use the word trichord is because they don't want to reference diatonic functional harmony. Because if I said triad, you would know what that means, but you would associate it with diatonic functional harmony. So in 12-tone music, because they're not dealing with functionality and traditional structures of chords and thirds, they call it trichord, and it's just much clearer. And as soon as you say that word, immediately you know we're talking about something that's beyond diatonicism. You know,
right? So great.
Yeah. But anyway, you know, the idea of visualizing, you know, and you know, when you're working on something that's foreign to you, and you're trying to incorporate that and get that into your you know, physical musculature, so that it becomes part of your body, because, you know, we're physical beings and have to execute certain movements and train ourselves to do this in the moment so that we're not thinking about it. And then we have to be able to actually, to be able to visualize it in our mind as far as, you know, if you're playing 3 pitches, as you play them, what are the relationships to each other? What does it sound like? Are you clear about what those are? So it's not just a physical thing you're doing, so that you understand, like, you know, I'm playing, you know, this is the second pitch in the trichord, this is the third pitch in the trichord, or it's in this rotation. And I'll get to what that means in a bit. But so that you're very clear about it, because it's important from building melodies and a melodic standpoint that you know, are aware of that. And the more you do it, it becomes, you know, it's like when we first learn music, you know, when you're taught intervals,
right?
You know, and you're like, well, what was a major third? Oh, what was, you know, and you're going through and trying to remember how many half steps are in that, you know? And, you know, I mean, it's the same thing, you know. So through visualization and you know, and hearing, and, you know, it's an ear training thing too, because as you work on that.
There we come to the next next one, which is another great quote, which is let's see, 43 over here, which I thought was also very profound. And see, okay, So I'm going to read this whole paragraph because I think it's very important. It says here, remember that the unifying principle of this system is the ear perceiving order to the interval content of the music. Even when played in a diatonic harmonic context, the sound of non-diatonic trichords or non-diatonic pitches in a trichord retain a structural significance and are heard as relevant in relation to their diatonic partners. It is very important to be aware that the perceived level of dissonance in these trichord combinations is affected by the melodic and rhythmic development of the musical phrase and its resolution to the consonant pitches of the chords. But specifically the first part of that paragraph I thought was so on point. This is something you could maybe elaborate on that a little bit, because I thought that was so important.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing is that the difference between, when you're listening to functional harmonic music, based on, cadences and things, is that we hear points of resolution, and that's what the ear listens to. And that's the way the music is structured.
Right.
But with 12-tone music and serial music in general, the thing is that all the music is based on interval relationships.
Right.
So intervals are all that matters, and that's how larger structures are built, and that's how compositions are arranged. The composer making determinations as to what is the important interval in this, and how am I going to do this. And so when you play any kind of trichord structures, if we're dealing with that, actually pertains strictly to the section dealing with improvising in a diatonic setting. So taking these 12-tone ideas and playing them on chord changes.
Right.
And the idea is that you hear the structure of the trichord, even if they're specifically in that instance, we're talking about taking two trichords and playing them over chord changes. And there will be levels of, depending on the combinations you use, there will be levels of either greater or lesser dissonance, depending on what you choose to play. You can choose trichords pairs that are very consonant sounding, and you probably wouldn't even know that they were derived from a 12-tone row. Or you can choose to play ones that are much more dissonant. And those are the ones I find more interesting, because they have the quality of bending your ear, because you have a chord quality being sounded by the band, the rhythm section, and then as an improviser, we're superimposing another structure over that. And there will be the methodology, we can talk more about this as we get deeper into it, but the methodologies, there's 3 methodologies that I approach in the book for using these. And there very often would be notes in the 2 trichords that are consonant, that work functionally on the chord, like D minor, there might be an A in there. Great, that works great. But maybe 2 other pitches are what we would traditionally call wrong notes on the chords, right? And as those 2 triads interact, you'll have a series of consonants and dissonance that happen. But what the ear perceives is the structure of those 2 trichords and their relationship to each other, because it's because of the interval content. And so when you're improvising, the interval content still retains its quality, even though you'll have dissonant pitches, being sounded against whatever the rhythm section.
Right, I found that was also one thing that you noticed in the book, which I thought was so significant, that although you're dealing with all these different pitches,
Right.
it is the form of the trichord and it's whatever shape it is, that shape gives it consistency.
Right.
And it is the consistency that really makes it work.
Exactly, because it's very much, it's very much a melodic system.
Right.
Because, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because we can go to the next level, which is where we're not dealing, the whole system of this book is dealing with, one trichord type and its expression within a 12-tone row. So we have 4 of them.
Right.
And that's very kind of mono, kind of chromatic sound of that one thing. We can go to other levels where we're dealing with 2 different sounds.
Right.
But you have to start square A before you get to the next thing. But with this, the thing is that the beauty of it is that it's a very melodic system. So you're playing these melodies, in fact, that are it's no different than playing a different. It's smaller. It's cellular. It's like, I think of this stuff as being kind of the periodic table or the DNA of music, because 3-note chords are the smallest kind of harmonic fully harmonic thing there is. I mean, dyads are incomplete harmonies. You know, they imply something, but they're not fully functional. You know, but 3-note chords have a complexity and are like kind of the the DNA of molecular DNA of all music.
Right,
you know?
right.
So you know, that's kind of the way I see it.
Right. I think also one of the benefits that also comes with this principle, and I've noticed that immediately when I started practicing this, is I think it's specifically for horn players, or it's the intonation factor.
Right.
Because it really puts you on the spot in
right, because
that was
a lot of intervals.
That was the first thing I noticed, that wow, you got to really slow it down and really take that sound in slowly. So because it's one thing, we all know they have in whole steps and we can move to it pretty fast, but to really hear it and have the right pitch, they can really tell. And my experience, it was so significant.
Yeah, well, you end up with, when you start dealing with all the rotations, all the different, basically a rotation is the 12-tone version of inversion.
Right.
We wouldn't call it inversion in 12-tone music because inversion means something totally different. But so we use the word rotation. But when you start dealing with all the rotations, you end up with these different intervals that very often you can kind of you can cheat.
Right, yeah,
you can cheat. And you hear it's not right if you don't really focus on that.
I'm cheating. I have a question.
Yeah.
Because from the beginning on, you're dealing with a number system that is solely based upon half steps.
Right.
Now, when you're not used to it, it plays tricks on you.
Yeah.
Because you're so used to when you see a number 4, you think, oh, it's the 4th,
Right.
Or 7, oh, that's the 7th.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we're dealing with all the half steps.
Right.
The whole principle is that the scale is subdivided from 0 to 12, right?
Well, to 1.
Or
I mean 11.
To 11,
we don't,
yeah,
we
to 11.
don't have,
yeah,
because 0 is the
11.
same as 12, right?
Right, exactly.
So C is 0, and B is 11, and then everything is broken down from that. And
so I found myself every now and then I said, oh yeah, for example, with the tone rolls, I said, oh yeah, that's a C7 flat 9 sharp 5. If I see there's 2 of those chords, then there you go, there it is. But then it's funny, says, yeah, I don't think that's really the idea here.
Right. Well, I purposely avoid talking in diatonic terms. Like a lot of each one of these trichords, there's only 12 of them. Which is, this system is really elegant and it's very simple, and it's not something that I invented at all. It's something that every music theorist knows, every modern music theory guy knows, and they take it for granted, and they're very unimpressed with it.
Yes.
They are, because there's so many more interesting things to them that you can do from set theory.
Right.
And this is like the most boring. But for us,
what is set theory?
Well, set theory is like, I use that word interchangeably with post-tonal theory, whatever.
Okay.
But set theory is basically all the kind of functional workings of serial music, like how they organize it, the words that they use, all the ways of codifying, because the first person, Alan Fort, was a great music theorist who basically wrote the first book on set theory, dealing with every possible note combination that you can have. And he sat down, and I think he's obviously a math guy.
Right.
But they've codified every possible combination of pitch, and they've categorized it according to its interval content, and they've classified it and named it. They have also been able to classify each one of these according to its relationship to other groups of pitches, its complements, and what are the relationships between them, and all these. There's tons of parameters that they use to find significant relationships or ways of playing off of different combinations of sets and stuff. And it's huge. It's a very big field, and it's very complicated. But and so for us, as improvisers, we need a system that is we can internalize. Something that is useful. That's like basically a system of harmony. Because that way we have something to be drawn,
Right.
And to have every note combination possible is totally useless to us,
right.
Unless of course you're composing, and then you can sit down, and do that. But so the trichord sets, which are, you know, the 3-note sets that all these theorists have like written about and everybody, all of them know about, is the one that's you know, has the fewest possibilities and has the most possibilities. Because, you know, as we look at those, this world unfolds that, you know, we can look at each one of these rows and each one of these trichords has relationships to chords that we know. Right. You know, because, you know, you have some of the trichords are like minor or dominant 7th chords without a 3rd, or, you know, minor 7th chords without a 5th, or they're like, you know, like major 7 chords without a 5th, or a major 7 chord without a 3rd. But you don't, you know, in the book I don't call them that, and I don't even reference that, because number one, you should see that that's what it is, and number two, we want to deal with what it is, because we're thinking in terms of, you know, not labeling it according to what we're used to. And I think it's important to look at it as just the object that it is, because it's useful in a lot of ways. It opens your mind to other possibilities.
Well, this is a great introduction. I just want to tell you that the book is very significant. You know, obviously that's the reason why John is here. That's why we're talking about it. One thing that I can tell you is that apart from that these concepts are being addressed in the book, it gives a very clear guideline in how to start, where to start, what to do, how to set yourself up, and how to get ready to the next phase. This is not so much, in my opinion, not so much a book where you can just pick a topic somewhere in the middle of the book and just go for it. I think it's really worth your while to start from the beginning, read the introduction, first 5 chapters, so you get familiarity with the definitions and with the principle involved, which is ingenious. I thought also how you group certain intervals into the smallest movements and all that kind of stuff. It's really great. So also it has music samples, so you can actually immediately try it with the CD. So I highly recommend you to get the book and get to work. We're going to take now a short little break, and then John's going to talk more in detail about the concepts and also give us a
little taste of it.
Showcase.
Yeah.